So this house regrets the automation of labor, and we don't necessarily regret the increases in productivity that result from automation, but what we do regret is the effects that this automation has had on the labor market itself. So like, let me just like define what we're going to like use, like what we mean by automation for this round. So like automation would be the replacement of not just only low skill labor jobs, but also higher skill labor level jobs, such as those in the finance industry, by machinery and algorithms. All right. So this would lead me into like saying just like, all right, so like we regret the immense trade-off on the side of the job market, and we believe that it does severely like outweigh the benefits in productivity that it has brought us. So first, we do think that like on the side of low skill labor, which is like a huge base of the economy, the job market will contract severely, very severely, because low skill workers, uh, low wage workers are basically just all getting replaced by machinery. All right, truck drivers, now they have automated cars. Now they can't be truck drivers anymore. They lose their jobs. That is bad. That puts a massive burden on the already burdened welfare state, which already has limited resources to help the most marginalized in society. But now, like a huge part of society, which previously had jobs, no longer has the jobs that they once had, so they will become dependent on the state for resources. Now, you say you may like want to raise taxes to like help these poor people, but the thing is that automation doesn't only affect low skill workers, all right? Because through the development of algorithms, through the development of programming, like in the finance industry, you see this like pretty strongly. Like many bankers, like before, like in rooms, like there'd be like 300 bankers. Now, like you only need like 5 to do the job of 300 because they have algorithms doing a lot of the work for them. So like it's not just affecting low skill labor, it also extends to like the middle and upper class industry too. So you say like, why not raise taxes? Well, all right, but you could just try raising taxes to like make up for this. Like that might be like something that like we could have done like all along. But those industries, like the people you would want to raise taxes on to provide for these benefits, they're also losing jobs. They're also dropping out of the labor force. So the tax revenue, we believe, may not be enough to cover this as the issue grows even further in the future. Um, Next, like, all right. So why not like just like educate yourself further, as opposition may say, like, what is wrong with not educating yourself further? Well, for one thing, we believe that this huge like increase in automation over the past few years, which we regret immensely, has just has become to like contract the labor market. So what does this really like do? Like what effect does this have on like human capital? Well, for one thing, like wages are lower overall. All right. There is a higher demand for jobs and there are less jobs to go around. So what does that let companies do? That lets them have to offer like it gives them the ability to offer lower wages overall because there's a lot of people competing for a limited amount of jobs. Now, what does this do like when it comes to like educating yourself? Well, for one thing, like as I mentioned earlier, like there are higher like skill level jobs such as in the finance industry, which are being crowded out by automation. So like those like avenues become more limited because those job markets become even more competitive. So one thing, like if you educate yourself in that direction, you're not even guaranteed to get a job out there anymore. Because wages are actually lower, um, you don't have the means to actually like educate yourself. What does that lead people to do? Maybe they have to take out more loans. Maybe they have to expose themselves to more risk. And even then, like they're still not guaranteed a job, or they have to switch into other job fields, which they might have not even been like considering before. Overall, like human capital, human labor productivity goes down. And that we believe on like our side of the house is not good. Um, so what did we like really like just brought you here today? We believe that automation, as it's like risen now, like it has created increases in productivity. That is true. But the increases in productivity have the massive trade-off of replacing huge swaths of the population with machinery, with algorithms. And by doing so, they've shrunk the labor market, they've lowered the availability of wages for people left in the labor market because there's more competition for those labor. So it's not just the unemployed now here too. It's people who already have jobs, like their opportunity for advancement is lowered because there's a lot of people competing for that job. Yeah, and their opportunity for like future investment is lowered because there's like not a lot of, there's less avenues to like branch out. So because automation has fundamentally just changed, the labor market, it has not only affected low skill workers, but also higher skill workers in the finance industry, and contracted the system as a whole. We on this side of the house, and like destroyed, like basically like severely impacted their ability to actually like invest in themselves in human capital. We believe that this had horrible effects. It's lowered productivity altogether on the side of the human factor, and in exchange for productivity on the machine side. It's given companies an advantage because now like there's a lot more people competing for their jobs, so they get the opportunity to like give less benefits, give less wages, because everyone's competing for their jobs. So we believe that we strongly regret this, and House is proud to propose.
I thank the Prime Minister for this fine speech and call for the leader of the opposition.
You prefer not to be live streamed?
It's okay.
Okay. At least we agree on something with the government team, that automation will increase the production and will eventually increase the efficiency. And first of all, some rebuttals. Well, we also accept that in the short run, there will be an increase in unemployment. But we believe that by the revenue gained from this automation, we believe that we can compensate the cost of that unemployment, because in reality, the situation that low-skilled people are in is like the following. I mean, they just happen to find themselves in those jobs because they were not educated well, and they probably do the things they don't like to do. So we believe that by implementing this automation into the labor market, we believe that people will find other things to make themselves happier. And we believe that the government will pay those facilities to make those people more happy. Like the cost of switching jobs or sunk cost in low-skilled labor market will be compensated with the revenue gained from this automation. And in terms of the middle and high class people, we believe that the work on their shoulder will be lessened, so that they will probably be less stressful, and because the things that they would have to take care will be the algorithms or math. So the incidents and accidents, or the probably the human caused miscalculations will also decrease by the automation, because when we implement the automation into the labor market, we believe that in physical and in mental world, the human happiness will enhance, because by doing that, we believe that all of the people will have more time, and I mean, they will save more time, more capital, and more energy. So the governments should, or the governments can, direct those savings to other things to increase their citizens' well-being. Because when that would automation automation, we believe that help to reduce the rate of suicide in in high GDP countries, because the well-being of people isn't just measured by the amount of income they earn. So the competition also makes those people more stressful. So their relationship with friends or their families, or the relationship between the mother, father, or the child will be happier. And furthermore, we also believe that and also in the long run, we believe that it's possible and most probable that a general income can be created from that automation, because as I said, the efficiency and the amount of production will eventually increase. So the surplus can be distributed to those people, and by doing so, we will enhance the individual's happiness, and we also decrease the gap between the income inequalities, which will lead to the increase in social cohesion in society. So the general well-being of people will increase, because now they have more time, they have more energy, and they have more opportunity to to uh, uh, to uh, to to do things like, I mean, even some people uh, like they may even find their life goals, like self actualization, and by doing so, they, I mean, they will be happier, because they are not working in the jobs that they don't like to. So yeah.
Isn't it a lot harder for someone to achieve like self-actualization if like any
Yeah,
potential
yeah,
form
yeah,
of
I
income
see.
they have is gone? So
Yeah,
they don't have a
yeah,
place to
I see, but I mean, we accept the initial initial harms, but we say that governments can compensate those initial harms by funding funding the by funding people's or at least helping them to enhance their happiness or well-being. And by doing so, I mean, in general, when we increase the inefficiency production, and and decrease the human-based calculations, or like the greed, we also believe that the damage the humans cause on the environment will also decrease. So we believe that there will be a more sustainable future for future generations. So I mean, the planet will be more livable for the future generations. So for all these reasons, we are pro to oppose. Thank you.
I think we'll leave off the opposition for 5 each, and I invite this time as you.
You want to be recorded?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Okay, so I'm going to intertwine rebuttal into my speech, but let me just start with this. We focus heavily on the economic argument. And what we've just heard from side opposition is that automation is great because, governments can, but let me just reiterate the economic theory which which proves that you are wrong. Automation has significantly reduced employment opportunity. Thus, higher supply of labour equals lower wages. Thus, lower tax revenue burdening the welfare state. Because, as the side opposition has misconstrued, often corporations don't operate within these Western, necessarily like as a system of all Western countries. And therefore, because they don't operate, the government can't tax. So therefore, they do not have this capacity to compensate. But on to my idea of the economic argument, although in itself is important, because obviously people cannot be taxed the same way that they can, therefore the welfare state is burdened, therefore the people are having a low standard of living. That is not necessarily the main argument which we want to bring you today. What we want to bring you today is the fact that we regret it because of the role of the state. The role of the state is to protect its citizens. We as a government has failed to do this. We can't protect and sustain the welfare state in the way it is. We wish it would be so easy as to cure that what automation has done to the job market, as the Beveridge report of 1947 did. It would be nice if we could just have job centres where we can send people, say, hey, here you go. Here's how you're going to be employed. Here's your sense of work. But no, because there aren't those opportunities. And we can't develop those opportunities because of the fact that companies, and this is onto my I was going to come to my fourth point, but now with my first, is that companies are motivated by profit incentives. This is the theory of the firm, if this is how we will define companies are as they are. Automation is cheaper and preferable to a company, and therefore is more preferable to a company than not to develop automation. And automation, although at present you may argue like, hey, it's just low skilled jobs, hey, it's only high skilled jobs in the financial sector, we regret it because the effects that it's going to have on our livelihood in the future. And this is where I want to focus my debate, because it is an unstoppable force. Inequalities are bad at the moment, and we regret that, but they will grow. It's inevitable they will grow. And you discussed a lot in your debate how, to quote you verbatim, that there will be other things to make people happier. It will be less stressful. We can have self-actualization. But actually, as we've discovered in literature, in our experience, people define themselves, their worth, often based on their occupation. And a job is called an occupation because it's on which what they occupy themselves, with which they develop their sense of worth, their role in society. You can only look to political philosophers to find this point. But then again, at the same time, the effects on the livelihood, the standard of jobs which people now are expected to do are lower, and then there's this lower sense of worth, again on the same point. But again, I want to talk about, you're saying how, the world will be better for future generations because people can find other things to occupy themselves. Well, I'm not quite sure where you're getting this from, because we now need 4.6 planets in order to sustain the lives that we built ourselves. Automation not only has affected employment, and therefore, as I just argued, people's happiness, their sensibility, their chance to invest in capital and consumption, because they themselves are not getting income, corporations, which the government can't tax are. So the opportunities for children are reduced because, one, their parents can't fund, two, the government can't fund. We're in a time of austerity. We will probably continue to be with automation. But again, back to this point that you highlighted, side opposition, of sustainability, that the planet will be more livable, that it will be better. But the environment, the effect on the environment that we've had, can you really say that we shouldn't regret automation because of the effect that we've had? Have you not seen a picture of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? The effects that we've had, the carbon dioxide in the end. Look at the 2016 Olympics in Beijing. A lot of Olympians couldn't participate, they couldn't compete because of the pollution in the air. And this is what we are subjecting not only ourselves to due to automation, but also our children. And it's only inevitably going to get worse. And even though, yes, we've had productivity, great, we can produce more on a wider scale, great, I can have clothes made in China that's transported more quickly. But my children, if they decide to live in Beijing, may not be able to breathe. My children will not have the same opportunities because I will not necessarily, as we just discussed in terms of the job market, have the same employment opportunities as my parents did because the roles have been replaced. And this is the really main problem that we want to come back to, is that we regret it because of the future, and we regret what it's going to become, not only what it is now based on the economic argument, but the economic arguments in the future and the environmental arguments. But I also want to point to this idea of the developing countries. We strive as a race to develop and improve, and that's the result of automation. But Developing countries have low-skilled labor due to the lack of access to education. We're hindering their opportunity even further to grow and develop because materials can do that low-skilled labor even more easily. And because these countries have a high low-skilled labor, these countries are severely implicated with their ability to develop. It's harder for them to then raise their standard of living. Therefore, there's greater uncertainty, there's greater exploitation of firms, there's greater ability to take resources without compensation of these firms, because often you find firms go to developing countries, they'll take the resources, but also they'll offer employment opportunities. But we're saying those employment opportunities have reduced. Those employment opportunities are not as commonplace as they were. And thus, we have the issue where you're taking the resources without compensation. So what have we told you today? I want to reiterate that we regret, based on the implications and the ramifications of mechanization and automation in the labour market. And the labour market is important to us, it's fundamental to us, not only because it's been proven that people had defined their sense of worth, and I would like opposition to prove how other people, how they believe that, you know, when the Great Depression of 1923 occurred and people were severely depressed, we had some of the highest suicide rates that we have of the 20th century, or, for example, the financial collapse of 2008, in which people, when they found themselves in such situations, had difficulty. We want to ask you how, when not having jobs, people will realize the self-actualization. So we beg you to vote side oppositions, not only for the economic argument, but for the fact that we failed as the role of the state, that we failed for future generations, and we failed for development and developing countries. So I thank you very much, and I urge you to vote side opposition.
I think that the Prime Minister will be taking speech and call on the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
What to be recorded?
First, I want to tell how does our argument work. When opening government started to match, they said this won't only affect the low-skilled workers, but also the middle workers. But we believe that those workers are also unhappy in this status quo. How? Because, as you all know, mostly, of course, low-skilled workers are maybe more unhappy because of the basic alienation to their work. They don't get the satisfaction, they get underpaid, they work long hours, and they don't see the result of their production. But in today's world, especially like current big corporations, this is also the problem of the middle and even high workers. They work in their jobs in between some certain times they do some work, but they don't actually see the result of their job. They work too much and they don't really have the time for themselves. So, yes.
Would you argue that, are you arguing that unemployment is better than employment? Living in poverty is better
No,
than
I'm not saying that.
having an income?
So, let's say that this middle workers who are also unhappy get affected by this automation, but they won't suddenly just lose their job because they will have decreased load of work. So they will have like they said, this automation will make the algorithms they need to calculate. They will make this meaningless work, but the people will have a chance to work less hours, and they will have a chance to do the more meaningful side of the job. So they will have more time for themselves, and they will have a chance to do more satisfactory work instead of just being alienated of their job and to be unhappy. So, yes.
Where is this work coming from?
Okay, I'm also gonna explain that. So I'm going to tell our long-term plan. So, but with this automation, we are making more production with less people. Like I said, this will at first might lead to unemployment, but we have a solution for that. So these machines, this automation doesn't actually require monthly wages or healthcare, so they cost much less than people. So there is more income to the country. So we have more production and more income and less wages to pay those machines and robots. So what do we do with this more income? It gets paid. Returns to people as more wages with less work because they don't need these robots and automatic machines will help them to do less work, but also since they don't get paid, also this money will go to the people. We said that there is more income to the country, and so therefore, even as they suggested, let's say that there are maybe less high middle workers to pay taxes, but since there is more income, there are more income taxes to be paid to the state. So what can the state do with this more income taxes? And more income to the country with the exports they get. So what can we achieve with this? Firstly, you can compensate for the low-skilled workers' unemployment in the first place in the beginning. But we have a more long-term solution. With this automation, this country can be a more culture-based society. With this more income and less people to work in those factories and those meaningless jobs, the state can create funds for the researchers and for the culture-based and humanities-based areas like philosophy, art, and these kind of things. But what happens in the status quo, and why is this world is better than the status quo? Because today, an art graduate in my country probably would end up being a waitress, and would be very unhappy because this waiting on the tables doesn't really satisfy her, and she wants to make a more meaningful job to make the self-realization, and she wants to work on this, but there's no actual funds and there's no actual areas to work on. But because the country needs this wages and needs in the economy, she has to do that for the basic needs. But if this country has a welfare because of the automation, then they can channel this welfare and money into these kind of areas where people can be more happy to work in. So this is why this world is much better than the status quo. So how can we decrease the harms of unemployment? Like I said, the state can compensate it in the first place. Then they can channel this income to the other kinds of funds to provide more satisfactory and happy jobs for the people. This is also good for the future of the society because they will develop their culture and art and this kind of areas better. And thanks to automation, we can make better calculations in order not to pollute the environment, opposing the government side. Because the reason why we are polluting is the people, not the machines. Because let's say this factory works 10 hours to make the production. With automation, we will have more efficiency, and the factory will work 5 hours. So therefore, using less fossil fuels, and polluting the environment less. And these machines can make better calculations in order to minimize this pollution, and it also presents a better solution to the environmental damage. Thank you.
I think that you are the position for this fine speech and call upon the member of government.
Yes, ma'am. start, a few points of rebuttal. Okay, so thing number one, right? We think that the opening half of the opposition side has really missed a lot of their burden in this debate, right? I think that because this is a regrets motion, they need to be defending the automation of the past. Like the world they're proposing of like luxury, fully automated post-scarcity world is delightful. Then we also need to defend like the automation that happened during the Industrial Revolution and since then throughout the 20th century. We don't think they've done that at all. Like, yeah, sure, we'll join your luxury post-scarcity communist world. Brilliant. But please defend like the entirety of the 20th century automation first. Okay, a few other points of rebuttal. First of all, like this idea of initial harms, they'll go away eventually, right? Like it's been like over 100 years since we started properly automating within Europe and the rest of the world. We haven't seen this like sudden redistribution of wealth throughout, like formerly capitalist corporations suddenly become incredibly benevolent and give and share out their profits and become cooperatives. We haven't seen this happen. We need you to give a reason why it will plausibly happen in the future for some reason. Second of all, there's like the rebuttal to the idea of like, the environment will be fixed. I think that when the costs of running a factory go down, for example, because you can make a machine run it, you're likely to have more factories, have more self-driving cars, so you don't have truck drivers anymore. Right? We think this leads to pollution. The Industrial Revolution has been the main polluting event for the Industrial Revolution, and after that has been the main polluting event for the entirety of the world's history. We don't think you can say, oh, but in the next 10 years it'll get better. If you like that ship sailed, you need to defend that and say why that is a justifiable harm that we can accept for all the good things that you're yet to tell us about. Also, like, okay, this decreased workload thing, right? Please tell us why, like, capitalist corporations who seek profit are suddenly going to start paying people the same amount for working 10 hours they have been working 40 hours, right? If you are only needed for 10 hours by the corporation that employs you, they are only going to pay you for those 10 hours. You're not going to have enough money to live on. Most corporations are not cooperative. They are not owned by their workers. The profits are not redistributed through the workers. And there's idea of satisfactory work where you know what you're producing. Most satisfactory work where you know what you're producing, as I'll go into later, is that craftsmanship and farming happen pre-automation. The idea that we might get back to this eventually in a way you haven't properly explained is not enough to defend what's already happened. Now, two big points of substantive, two slightly little ones. The big ones are the organizational power of labor and how this massively decreases that, and also how automation has made inequality even more cyclical than it was. And like there'll be two little things like furthering the impacts of unemployment and talking briefly about the alienation of labor, right? Okay, so firstly, the organizational power of labor. There are two things that automation does to make it really hard for workers to organize. Thing one is that it makes work a lot less communal. Because you are now one person operating a load of machines or a computer, you are not with your co-workers all the time. This makes it really hard to have union meetings, to organize marches. If you're like feudal serfs on a farm, you can no longer agree, look, our land baron is being shit, we're going to storm his castle and steal his grain. You can't do these things. Secondly, the corporation that employs you has a massive threat to you, right? Because realistically, by this point, most jobs can be done plausibly by machinery. It may be that it's slightly more expensive to employ machinery at this point than a human, and that is why they're not doing it yet. But if you demand better working conditions or better money or better pay, they have the threat of being able to replace you with a machine. This makes it really hard to speak up about problems in your workplace. Three impacts of this, things you can't change. If you have terrible working conditions, it's harder to get rid of them. You are more likely to be injured. You are more likely to get like black lung in mines. You are more likely to be abused by bosses. Secondly, you can't change your low pay very easily, right? If you're being paid very little, it's really hard to get minimum wage to increase because both firms can replace you with a machine, and governments know, I'll take you in a second, and governments know that if they increase minimum wages, corporations are likely to reduce their employment levels and therefore screw their employment figures. I'll take you, please be brief.
Okay, do you think that there's going to be a need for work once we achieve full automation?
If we achieve full automation, right? First of all, incredibly unlikely. Second of all, even if there is no need for work, this is a bad thing because it's just like large corporations and individuals that own lots of capital, reproducing the amount of capital they owe, and so people get desperate enough they have to start like selling organs and shit, right? This is like the ultimate end of capitalism. If people have to sell their physical, like the only thing they have, their physical bodies, right? Okay, now very briefly, cyclical inequality, right? The thing that happens with automation is if you have capital, you buy capital machinery and you reproduce your wealth with that. Far less of that goes to wages. The profit margin is far higher. This makes it easy for wealthy corporations and individuals to make themselves even wealthier. This increases inequality in two ways. First of all, internationally, right? Most wealthy corporations and people exist in the global north, the first world, the developed world, whatever we want to call it, right? Secondly, this happens within nations, right? Wealthy people in nations are able to increase their wealth. Problems with this. It makes people and nations far easier to exploit. It means that you can take natural resources from developing nations. It means you can underpay employees in developing nations, the ones you're still employing. It means you can get around laws in developing nations because you have lots of money. You can bribe officials, right? Within nations, it means you can lobby governments for laws that are more advantageous to you. It means that you can also bribe police officers when you happen to commit crimes. All these things are bad. Additionally, just poverty is bad. Inequality necessarily includes poverty. Poverty is bad. You can't buy shit. You need shit to live. It's bad. Okay, now the two very brief things. First of all, I'm going to further impact unemployment. Even if we have this ideal welfare state you're talking about, three problems. First of all, work is good. It's social. It gives you a community. Second of all, work is good. It's rewarding. It allows you to realize you're doing something that might help people in some way. Thirdly, if you're living off the state your entire life, you probably feel guilty about that to some extent. And there's a negative feeling. We don't like that. Secondly, though, reasons we won't get this perfect welfare state you're talking about. There are lots of countries in the world. Lots of them have low tax rates. Corporations franchise their formally, so you don't have to pay taxes in the countries. You do not get this perfect welfare state. And finally, briefly, the alienation of labour. What automation does is it means you no longer produce a product you can be proud of and give to people or sell to people and they will like it. It means you are a tiny part of the production chain of a project or of a product or an idea. You no longer have a conception of, I'm a craftsman, I'm a carpenter, I made this wardrobe, someone's going to have it in their house for generations and they're going to love it. You no longer get that satisfaction of knowing what you produce and why you produce it, because you are essentially a tiny person who deals with numbers or makes like the head of a pin in the supply chain, and you do not get that satisfaction from your work. So because you take away the emotional aspect of work, because you screw over poor people systemically, and because you make it impossible for labourers to demand better conditions or pay, we would like you to vote side proposition. Thank you.
I thank the member of government for his speech and call on the member of the opposition.
I've completely lost my voice, so would you mind not recording me? Thank you so much.
right, hi. It's been a great debate so far. I would like to let you know of my agenda. What I'm going to be doing first is rebutting some of the points of the last speaker. Then I would like to talk about what this debate is actually about. Then I would love to talk about the strains of automation, the strains of work, the benefits of work, the justification of automation up to this point and further, the themes of equality, human nature, and the difference between opening op and our case. Okay, starting out with a little bit of rebuttal of what has just been said. Basically, all of the criticisms I've just heard against our case have been against the status quo and against the state that the job market is currently in, which is the state of not full automation, but partial, which is something that we also concede the harms of the current system. And so does OO, in fact. So there's been, for example, talk of how unionization can be a mitigation to some of these issues, but the issues are still present. No, sorry, not right now. Also, in general, there's been a talk a lot about socialist policy and the welfare state, how we can improve working conditions. OO touches on healthcare and things like that. The issue is fundamental. The issue is one of class and of work, and that is something that's simply not been addressed in this debate by anyone other than opposing opposition. In general, just people are criticizing the status quo, which is something we want to do as well. In fact, criticizing this current state leads us to understand why our case is good, and we should go forward with automation rather than leaving it at this weird in-between point we're currently at, where we have the harms of not only partial automation, but of work in the first place. So, first point done. Now, the main thing I'd like to say is essentially this debate is a little bit of an ends versus means debate. So we have a lot of criticism of the means, which is partial automation. There's also not been any criticism of full automation at all. I'd like to point out, no, not right now. Then basically all of government's cases are a bit about the strains of automation, which makes sense. So we have things of that, for example, of the contraction of the economy, ideas of unemployment leading to lower wages, leading to lower tax money, to less welfare, thus impacting the welfare state. Then income inequality as a result of skilled and higher skilled labor, less paid and more paid labor, less children, negative population growth was a point I think brought up, environmental harms, job security, things like this. The issue with all of the harms you've presented, and literally all of them, is that all of these harms are dependent on the fact that the job market exists and not that automation exists. No, thank you. Basically, every single harm you've listed to me is an inherent issue of class structure, of the job market, and of working, not of automation, be it full or partial. Even OO concedes on these harms, but says that the harms are worth it for the long term. And I'll present OO's case in a bit. Next, I would like, as I just said, to compare the strains of work with the strains of automation. I would like to argue they are pretty much the same. Now, don't misunderstand, by automation I mean partial. So the state that our state that we are discussing is currently in is partially automized. No, thank you. And I've already explained that the strains of this state, the issues you have presented, are all a result of the working market. So my partners already started talking about the opportunity cost of work. What is the opportunity cost of work? As Jack has already so smartly said, the opportunity cost of work is everything but work. Because you could be doing anything but working with the time you spend working. You could have some time self-actualizing. You could be doing literally nothing. I'd like to point out that no one in this debate on site government seems to care about the happiness of people. And I think, no, thank you, not right now. The happiness of people is to give them the freedom to spend their time however they like. And under our model, they will have unlimited freedoms to do whatever they like, thus maximizing freedom and happiness. No, not right now. I will actually let you know if I can take one. So again, the many harms of automations are not novel to partial automation, but they are in fact inherent problems of class structure and the job market. Unemployment injury due to work, abuse by employers, job insecurity, satisfaction with your work. Yes, satisfaction with your work. That's something I'd like to talk upon. This is something that OO has already touched upon. It's called objectification. Essentially, Marx proposes that when a worker becomes so uninvolved with his work, and it is work that is the inherent problem here, it takes place a thing that's called objectification, whereby the worker is disconnected from his product, no longer feels any connection to his work, the labor of what used to be his love, and now his downfall. All of this is a result of capitalism, not a result of automation. Yes.
Given your entire point relies on all the means of production becoming owned by the community, please explain how this happens under full organization.
Well, no, not quite. What I'm proposing is, yes, okay, wait. So I hope I don't misunderstand. You're saying that I'm representing the benefits of a model whereby all the means of productions have been ceased, but my model doesn't show that? That's not true at all. Under our model, with humans no longer working but taking a backseat on work and only inputting their ideas into a fully automated production process, they have in fact full control over the means of productions, just do not need to handle them physically. Then there was a short point by closing about the benefits of work, social and having a sense of purpose. These things also fall under our model. These things you can also do in your free time with your passion things. I'm running out of time. Themes. Human nature. What's a human like when he's not working? He's happy, he's curious, he's social. All of the benefits that a worker also has, a normal human with free time also has. He has the ability to focus on a field of his interest, which leads to more research and invention. This is a point that has not been contested by anyone. And in general, I'd just like to say, capitalism sucks. Partial automation sucks. Full automation is the only way to go. And in light of this future, this current state is worth it. Yes. Thank you.